I mentioned that the cerebrum was the largest part of our brain, and it also contains the cerebral cortex, which is the only part of your brain which is conscious. You'll remember that the cerebral cortex is the outermost part of the cerebrum with ridges and grooves, and it also has gray, or it actually is composed of gray matter, which are the nerve cell bodies. So let's look at what is called the functional areas of the cerebrum. Now, this has to do with our ability to detect activity, electrical activity and metabolic activity in the brain when we subject somebody to particular stimuli, or we have them do something like speak, or we have them look at a picture, or we have them hear a sound. And so when we look at this, we can map the cerebrum. So we can see that there are different areas where different things are happening. And I mentioned previously that the occipital lobe, the back of the brain, tends to be associated with visual, or is associated with visual, and that the frontal lobe has to do with more problem solving and decision making. So I wanted to just specifically talk about the primary somatosensory area and then the primary motor area, because these are very interesting and they relate to what we were talking about with movement and what we're going to be talking about with sensing different parts of your body like touch. So let's talk about those two areas. Those are the areas that you need to know. So we have what is called the primary somatosensory cortex. So this is soma, means body. So this is body sensory. So this is like touch, and also proprioception, which has to do with being able to tell where your body is in space. I can tell with my eyes closed that my elbow is bent, for example, and that has to do with proprioception. So if I touch a part of my body, like my arm, then that can send an action potential up the nerve into my spinal cord and then up to my primary somatocortex, and it actually crosses over so that my touch on my left hand goes to my right cortex, and then I can consciously sense touch. So this is the conscious sensation. Okay, so that's my primary somatosensory cortex. We also have what is called the primary motor cortex. And this is where I initiate an action potential to go to a different part of my body. So motor has to do with moving muscles. So I can consciously send a signal to my finger to flex and extend. And that originates in the primary motor cortex. So this is conscious initiation of movement. So there are special places in that somatosensory cortex and in the motor cortex. It's kind of mapped out to your body so that if an action potential from my right shoulder goes to a particular location in my left cortex, I know that my right shoulder is being touched. It also, if I initiate an action potential on my left side, that is going to be sent to my right side of my body. So that is important when we start to talk about, like, for example, cerebrovascular and accidents like strokes that can affect, if it's on one side of the brain, it can affect and paralyze the opposite side. So let's look at that cortex again. So this is my front of my brain right here. My motor cortex is first, and then my somatosensory cortex is behind that. I did mention that there was a fifth lobe to the cerebrum, and this shows the insula, and that is gustatory, that is taste. And so if I open that up, there are some more ridges and grooves which make up my fifth lobe, which is associated with taste. So the only ones you really need to know for the purpose of the midterm and the final is the understanding that idea of the primary somatosensory and the primary motor area.